It is important that an organization protects the assets it has. Now, ultimately, the protection of assets is the responsibility of the senior management team. They are the people that own or have the fiduciary responsibility to protect the interests and assets of the organization. But asset management comes down to practical, everyday steps that we have to take as security professionals. We need to manage the assets. Now, in order to do that, first of all, we have to know what assets we have. And for many organizations, this is actually quite difficult because the organization has grown and developed, it's evolved and changed over the years. Staff has changed. So just in the area of IT, without even looking at other areas, we often have systems, networks, and pieces of equipment that nobody even knows about anymore. The first step in being able to manage our assets then is to be able to log or identify all of the assets we have so that we can provide them with adequate protection. It's pretty hard to protect something that we don't even know about. When it comes to assets, there are many assets of an organization. An asset is defined as anything of value to the organization. And of course, we hear from many companies, their most valuable asset are their people. The people with the skills and the knowledge they have, the people that help the business move forward. And we have to know how to protect those assets as well. We have equipment. We have hardware, and some of that equipment or hardware might be quite old. It might be something that was installed by people that don't even work for us anymore. So the idea of inventorying or being able to take track of all of that equipment is an incredibly important first step. We also have to understand the assets related to information. What information do we as an organization process, store, and are we therefore responsible for? Do we have intellectual property that needs to be protected? Anything from financial reports to, of course, employees' health records, all sorts of information we have that must be identified and adequately protected. We also have software. We have purchased software, or maybe we've even built it ourselves. So therefore, we have to make sure we've protected that software. We're practicing proper license management. And in the cases where we're using virtual machines, even those virtual machine images should be a part then of our software asset management program. The idea of asset management is that every organization is a bit different. New organizations don't have some of the same problems as an old organization with legacy equipment. But new organizations may not have the defined policies and procedures that an old established organization has. So every organization requires a tailoring of the asset management to correctly then deal with the asset management in a way suitable for that organization. So what are some of the things we have to be considerate of when we are developing an asset management program? Well, the culture. What type of organization are we? Are we an organization that's very rigid, careful, and conservative? Or are we an organization that's rather loose and not quite as structured? What are the laws that apply? Do we have legal requirements in the protection of various assets, such as human resources, data, and, for example, even things like network or system uptime? What's the region in which we operate? It could be that in some cases we have completely different jurisdictions, different legal requirements. It could be in some cases that assets we have are out in a very remote area, or something which is centralized in an urban area. Very different in the way we would protect such assets as well. And we have to understand the operational environment. Do we operate in an operational environment that's highly competitive or one that is military? Do we operate in an operational environment which is very regulated? Or do we operate in an operational environment where the main focus is on trying to grow and expand, and where they don't really mind if you take a risk and sometimes it doesn't work out? We need to understand the business so we protect the assets appropriately. When it comes to scope, we really have to declare who is the owner, who's responsible for the various assets, who's responsible for information, who's responsible for systems, who's responsible for networks, who manages the public key infrastructure, who looks after the employees. And we have clear definitions so we know those levels of responsibility for those individual assets. This means we have to have a way to determine and to have a recognition of who those owners are. Those owners therefore need to accept responsibility. They have to realize that it is their job to make sure things are adequately protected, and it is their job to provide oversight and governance for that asset. An important part of this is then setting up a way to keep track of and reporting to management on the status of the various assets. We have a record so we can track and allow management to know whether or not there are any problems they should be aware of. In tracking assets, we can do this, and you've seen this from many organizations. We'll put a label on desks and they'll put a label on laptops, for example, so we identify its owner. In some cases, we'll actually embed RFID chips, so a device can immediately be flagged or identified because it has a radio frequency identifier in it, which, say for example, even if a person was going to take it out of the company, there would be an alarm that came in that said, hey, did you log that out? Have you then declared that you're taking that asset outside of the facility? And one of the most valuable things of asset tracking is the use of a configuration management database. A configuration management database allows us to track the items and be able to know what is their current status. The key points to review: assets can only be appropriately and adequately protected when we know what they are and they're properly managed.